In the large world of fantasy gaming and its combat, there are many titles with great combat systems, whether it's Souls games that started their own subgenre or ones with less depth to the combat that are still fun like Skyrim. But there's one game that stands out to me as a complete masterpiece when it comes to gaming combat systems, and it's one based on pure skill, strategy, and dedication to learn. And that game is Nioh, and I'm going to be talking about both Nioh 1 and 2 today since Nioh 2 is basically just Nioh 1 but improved. It's hard to find where to even start with this game. It's gorgeous at times, and I really like the whole idea of you walking around, slaying demons, getting stronger as you go. And while its narrative may be considered weak compared to other games of its genre, I promise you this game's combat is truly like no other. So what makes a good combat system? Well, you want your reflexes and skill tested, as well as it not to be super easy, and that's why I think Nioh is excellent. Unlike many popular titles, Nioh's combat isn't just about over-the-top animations and button mashing, but it's also not just about baiting an attack to land yours then dodging. This is a game where most encounters are treated like a duel, demanding your full attention and skill. Nioh's combat is the most interesting blend of styles I've ever seen. If you haven't played Nioh, picture this. You're in a third-person action game, navigating the environment, dodging and slashing enemies, but you realize the combat mechanics feel different yet oddly similar. What I mean by that is obviously Nioh gets the Souls-like term thrown at it a lot, but it's a little different. Think about how in a game like Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter, that sort of arena fighting style combat, where every encounter is a duel and how mastering combos and when to block is the key to victory. But now imagine that in a third-person game with a lock-on and a dodge mechanic. Nioh to me feels like if Soul Calibur in a From Software game decided to have a baby. So now let me get to the title of this video, where I claim Nioh to be the mixed martial arts of gaming combat systems, which may sound weird at first, but hear me out. In most good combat games, timing and understanding the attacks are everything, but in Nioh it's deeper than that. In my opinion, Nioh's combat is like the UFC of combat in fantasy games. You're not just sticking to one thing, you're exploring a whole new range of combat techniques. Now let's talk about Souls games. They're more like boxing, great but limited. You're mastering a few moves at a time, diving into one style. And the same thing can be said about arena fighting games. But with Nioh, it's the full martial arts gaming combat package. You're not just tweaking character builds or sticking to one linear style of combat the whole time. And it's not like an arena fighter where every enemy is generally the same. You'll have to use different approaches and combos in Nioh depending on what enemy you're facing. So if you're craving a combat system that's as dynamic as it gets, Nioh's where it's at. It's not just a game, it's an art display of combat in fictional media. So let me dive into what makes it so great, and I want to start with the stances first. Nioh's stances aren't just about striking a pose, they're about shaping your combat style, and there's 3 different ones. Each stance offers a unique balance of offense and defense, allowing you to adapt to any situation on the fly. Whether you're in low stance throwing out low damage with fast strikes and being able to dodge quickly, or high stance trading your speed and defense for damage, or maybe mid stance which sits somewhere more balanced between the two. You can switch your stance whenever you want in-game, and your choice of stance constantly defines your approach to combat. It's not just about which stance looks the coolest, it's about learning when and what stance to use in the right situation. Key Pulse and Flux are also game-changing mechanics in Nioh I want to go over before moving on. Flux lets you seamlessly switch between stances mid-combo, keeping your attacks fluid and unpredictable thanks to the help of Key Pulse. Key Pulse, on the other hand, lets you recover stamina mid-fight by timing your button press right after an attack. Triggering a Key Pulse while switching your stances will trigger a Flux. Mastering mechanics like these in the 3 stances is the key to staying agile and dominating your enemies on the battlefield in Nioh. Unlike many action games, Nioh doesn't just focus on your stamina, it gives enemies their own stamina bars too. This simple addition transforms fights into intense strategic battles. In Dark Souls games, enemies often can feel like predictable obstacles, but in Nioh, a lot of enemies attack so swiftly and may have more difficult movesets to learn, so watching an enemy's stamina bar adds a whole new layer of depth, allowing you to anticipate their moves and capitalize on openings. Seeing enemy stamina in Nioh really changes everything. In Nioh, without mastering Key Pulse, Flux, and other advanced techniques, you'll find yourself probably playing the game something like Dark Souls. But when you dive into the mechanics, it's a whole new level of combat. When I first played Nioh, I felt overwhelmed, but as I got Key Pulse stance switching and Flux down, battles transformed into something straight out of an anime. And this is where a lot of people overlook Nioh's combat system. I was watching video essays on Nioh, or just Nioh combat in general, and it seems a lot of new players don't really use these mechanics how they should be. In this great video I watched by Chris Davis, there was one thing that kinda bothered me. He mentioned how choosing when and which stance should use doesn't really matter, and you should go with whatever makes you comfortable. And while this does have some truth to it, when I started understanding you should be switching stances mid-fight and using Flux to its advantage, the game almost became easy. Instead of just tapping 3 buttons on your controller to land 2 quick attacks and then a heavy attack after for a quick combo, you could land 2 quick attacks on low stance and then land a heavy attack on mid or high stance to really switch up your combat. And while switching your stance mid-fight and using skills may look flashy and cooler, I promise you it'll help the whole flow of the combat work way nicer in your favor. High stance has a slow roll as the dodge, similar to one you would see in like a Dark Souls game, where the low stance one is fast and agile. Mid stance cycles between both of these dodges. Even slight changes to your combat style can make a huge difference, like attacking in high stance and then switching to low stance really quick to dodge so you can get out of there faster. If an enemy is in a position where it's hard to attack you quickly or low on their stamina bar, it might be good to use high stance to attack them and deal out heavy damage. But high stance always leaves your guard more open and has longer attack animations, so it's more of a commitment. If the enemy's in your face and can quickly attack you but you want to dish out damage too, it might be better to use medium or low stance instead of high stance. And of course, to add even more depth to those stances, there's a light attack and a heavy attack. The way the heavy attack and low attack correspond to some of the weapon attacks is honestly brilliant. For example, say you're using the Gauntlets weapon, which is pretty much just your character using his fists and legs to attack. If you press square to land a light attack with fists, you'll notice you probably just land a bunch of quick punches. But if you press triangle to land a heavy attack, your character will start using powerful kicks in his moveset. The same can be said for a weapon like the Kusarigama, which is a sickle and a chain attached to a metal weight. This is definitely my personal favorite weapon. I've been using it since Nioh 1 and haven't put it down since. It's always my secondary or primary weapon whenever I'm playing Nioh. When you press square to land a light attack with the Kusarigama, your character will usually use the metal ball on the other side. Similar to fists, however, if you press triangle, your character will start to land heavy attacks with the sickle. There is still much more to go on about the combat, but if this isn't enough for you, it gets even deeper. And by this time, I should just mention we're still just talking about the weapons right now, which is just the foundation of the combat. There's still way more Nioh has to offer. Not only does every weapon in Nioh have its own unique moveset, but it also has its own unique skills you can unlock while progressing in the game. Similar to a game like Diablo where you unlock new abilities and skills for your class. The loot system in this game is also very similar to Diablo. Every weapon has a bunch of skills, some more effective and some look cooler than others. And not every skill is just a powerful attack, there's a good level of variety to the skills. Each weapon has its own unique parry skill too, for example. There's also skills such as Flux and other ones you can learn in the Samurai skill tree, which is a separate one from the weapons. Like, there's one that lets you dodge on a key pulse. One skill I've been using a lot recently from the Samurai skill tree is Flash Attack. Flash Attack can catch opponents off guard and deal significant damage, making it a valuable tool in combat situations. Flash Attack refers to the technique where players switch weapons mid-combo to perform an unexpected attack by seamlessly transitioning between weapons. Players can catch enemies off guard and maintain pressure during combat using this skill. This skill requires a little bit of timing and it's hard to get the hang of, but it can be really effective in battle, especially if you want to switch weapons mid-combo. Every weapon also has its own unique dash attack, where when you dash and do a quick attack at the same time, you can land a quick, decent damage strike. Now for just the basic stuff I went over, imagine putting that all together in a fight. You're constantly switching stances to be at the most effective position in battle, and you're landing your Flux and Key Pulse to manage your stamina as best as you can. And I forgot to mention, not only does this game have a dodge, but every weapon has its own block. The combat and combos in this game can feel so fast-paced and so satisfying in an RPG third-person environment. And just to add even more depth to this already such intricate combat system, you have your Soul Core abilities and your Yokai Shift. Soul Cores are abilities extracted from defeated enemy yokai that players can equip to gain additional skills and powers. Each Soul Core has unique effects such as offensive attacks and defense buffs. It's really cool to turn into the enemies you killed and do their abilities during combat. These abilities can also be super powerful and chain into combos really well. By strategically using Soul Cores, players can customize their combat style and adapt to different situations really nice with these yokai abilities. Yokai Shift is the next mechanic I'm going to talk about. This allows players to transform into a powerful yokai temporarily. While in Yokai Shift form, players gain increased strength, and you're basically invincible, but the more you get hit, the faster you'll be taken out of the Yokai Shift. It's basically like the ultimate power-up of the game. Burst counters are something. Burst counters are defensive maneuvers designed to counter enemy attacks. The 3 different Yokai Shift forms each have their own different burst counters. When timed correctly, burst counter interrupts an enemy attack, leaving them vulnerable for a counter attack. Mastering burst counters can be essential for controlling battles in Nioh. There really is no class picking in Nioh, but I guess picking your weapon is kind of like choosing your class. There is, however, a Ninjutsu and Omnio Magic skill tree. Ninjutsu and Omnio Magic are the 2 distinct skill trees that provide players with a range of specialized abilities and techniques. Ninjutsu focuses on agility and utilizing various tools to gain as much damage as you can in combat. Players can learn and equip ninjutsu skills to perform actions such as throwing shurikens, laying down traps, applying poisons, and using stealthy tactics to assassinate enemies. It's kind of cool that Nioh has this sort of like stealth aspect you can have on it if you want. The stealth aspect is just part of the ninjutsu skill tree though. Typically, the ninjutsu skill tree includes abilities related to evasion, distraction, and debuffing enemies. And of course, getting a lot of damage off on them with elemental items. Omnio magic, on the other hand, revolves around harnessing spiritual energies to cast powerful spells, debuffs, that kind of stuff. Players can learn and equip Omnio magic skills the same way they do the ninja ones. If you're playing co-op, you can buff allies yourself, you can debuff enemies, and provide various other support effects. The Omnio magic skill tree usually includes abilities related to healing, protection, and enhancing weapon damage. There are also some cool elemental spells you can cast on your enemies to do damage, of course. Additionally, players can enhance their ninjutsu and Omnio magic effectiveness by using it in combos to the greatest of their advantage, similar to a way you may incorporate a soul core ability in your combo. The ninjutsu and Omnio magic really encourages players to experiment with different combinations of abilities and gear to optimize their performance in combat. When all this flows together, you truly have an amazing combat experience. Nioh may seem overwhelming or almost like it has too much mechanics, but I really got into it and I would honestly give this game a 10 out of 10. To me, it's a complete masterpiece just on the combat alone. There's many titles with way better stories and better world design, but after playing a game like Nioh, I just can't really play Souls and look at it the same. It just feels boring and slow to me. And that really goes for any game with fantasy RPG style combat. People think it's crazy, but I put Nioh above Elden Ring as a game based on solely the combat system alone. I do love that Nioh uses real life characters, and I love the overall Japanese samurai, demon yokai vibe of the whole game, but this game wouldn't be 1% of what it is without the combat system it offers you. Nioh might be very linear with its level design, but I feel more immersed in Nioh than I have in any open world game or any game of the RPG action style genre, really. And I think it's just the combat system alone. It really makes you feel like you're the character in your game with how precise you have to time everything and how much different moves you have at your disposal. I didn't have a script for this video. I kind of just punched it in like I was making a song or something, so sorry if it's a little messy, but I truly just love this game, and I don't think I'll ever find a game with this intricate and as satisfying of a combat system. It's truly a masterpiece, and I know that term gets thrown around a lot nowadays, but I mean that when I say it. I've never played a game as good as Nioh. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you get the same experience, or at least a similar one that I got from this game. Have a wonderful day. Be safe.